multi-stage rocket leaving the Earth's orbit had woken something within him, and from that moment it consumed him. You could say that he was propelled with the same irresistible force, first to the University of Berlin, then to Verein für Raumschifffahrt, Society for Space Travel, and ultimately to the Baltic coast and the seaport of Peenemünde. At the time, German rocket research was already well advanced, for although the much-hated Treaty of Versailles had placed huge restrictions on the development of weapons, space travel had been excluded. This played into the hands of the German military, who quickly realized that liquid-fueled rockets launched from fairly simple makeshift platforms could travel further and faster than any artillery weapon, delivering their payload into every major city in Europe. Keller was 36 when he met the man in charge of the German space program, the rocket engineer and SS Sturmbannführer Wernher von Braun. The son of a Prussian baron, von Braun came from a family that had been fighting battles since the 13th century, and he had never lost his aristocratic streak. He strutted into rooms, snapped at anyone who argued with him, and could be coldly dismissive when he was in a certain mood. At the same time, he was utterly dedicated to his work, demanding the best of himself and everyone around him. Keller feared and admired him in equal measure. Of course, by this time, a certain Austrian corporal had come to power and Germany was at war. But none of this particularly interested Keller. Like many of the academics and physicists who were his only friends, he had little interest in the world around him, and if Hitler was going to plow funds, 11 million Deutschmarks appropriated from the Luftwaffe and the army, into rocket-powered interceptors and ballistic missiles, he could happily turn a blind eye to the Nazis' other less savory preoccupations. Indeed, he finally stood at Peenemünde with the first V-2 rockets being launched in the summer of 1944. He never considered the death and devastation that they would bring with their one-ton payloads. He was an artist, and this was his canvas. Watching the launches was for him a moment of pure ecstasy. The clouds of white smoke filled with tiny sparks from the igniter that suddenly rushed together into a brilliant red flame, the cables falling away and the sleek, elegant creature being released into the sky. The vibrations coursed through him. His entire skin seemed to come alive, and he felt the thrill of knowing that he was one of the handful of technicians who had helped in its creation, that the motors would produce an astonishing 800,000 horsepower, and that the rocket would soon achieve 5 times the speed of sound. The citizens of London would have no idea of the perfection, the sheer genius of the weapon that killed them. Often Keller couldn't help himself. He wept tears of pure joy. The war ended, and for a brief time Keller wondered if he might have to face up to certain repercussions. He had actually been present when von Braun surrendered to the Americans and had subsequently been interrogated by them as part of the famous Blacklist, the code name for German scientists and engineers of special importance. But he wasn't too worried. What von Braun and his team had created would be too valuable to the Allies, and he was confident that somehow their work would continue. He was right. The 2 men were released from custody on the same day. Along with another dozen scientists and technicians, they were flown out of Germany on the same plane, finally arriving at Fort Bliss, an American Army base near El Paso where, with new masters and, in a few cases, new identities, they continued their work exactly where they had stopped before they were so rudely interrupted. Keller was 50 now and nearing the end of his career. He had lived in the United States for 12 years, but nobody would ever have mistaken him for an American. He had the build and the physique of a foreigner, slow and cumbersome. His ponderous speaking manner and thick accent gave away his origins the moment he spoke. It didn't matter. The war was far enough away. People no longer cared. And anyway, in his own mind, he had assimilated in ways that mattered more, and which gave him complete